Support for This News is So Gay comes from the LGBTQ Plus Opportunity Fund of the Cleveland Foundation, leveraging philanthropy to empower LGBTQ plus communities. Welcome to This News is So Gay. I'm your host, Ken Schneck, editor of The Buckeye Flame, Ohio's LGBTQ plus newsroom. Thanks so much for joining us. I am really excited for this week's episode because we are exploring the place of blogs in our LGBTQ plus journalism landscape. Some questions we're going to talk about: how have blogs evolved and what place do they occupy now as we report the news? What are the barriers to blogging, including resources and relationships with legacy newsrooms? What is the absolute raw power of blogs and the impact they can have? And of course, we're not skipping Queer Joy this week. It is a part of our weekly routine. So where is our blogging roundtable finding queer joy in the news right now? Joining us this week to answer those questions and so many more, two folks on our roundtable. Once Pittsburgh's unofficial lesbian correspondent, and now very much officially one of the most important LGBTQ plus bloggers in the country, winner of more awards than I can name here. We wouldn't have any time to do the actual show, but just some of them include Outstanding Blog by GLAAD, a spot on the Out 100 list, and one of the Advocates People of the Year, creator of Pittsburgh Lesbian Correspondents, Sue Kerr. Sue, what a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm pleased to be here.
And joining Sue, HIV and AIDS activist for 40 years, previously named the LGBTQ plus Journalist of the Year by the National Association of LGBTQ plus Journalists, with whom he has also won 3 Excellence in Blogging Awards. He's also received the Outstanding Blog Award winner prize from GLAAD and a member of the Out 100, creator of the blog My Fabulous Disease, Mark S. King. Mark, welcome to This News is So Gay.
Thank you so much. I can't believe you got all of that out in one breath.
It's not my first rodeo, Mark S. King. I'll tell you that right now. And I have to say, our LGBTQ plus reporters roundtable, with 3 of us with only monosyllabic first and last names, is now assembled. So let's dive in. Let's talk about history, because the two of you have incredible history in this writing space. Sue, I hope there's a big birthday anniversary celebration coming up, because Pittsburgh Lesbian Correspondents, and I know I don't need to tell you this, you already know, is turning 20 years old this month. First of all, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
What do you bring forward from those early days of Pittsburgh Lesbian Correspondents?
Well, I've been giving this some thought because my blogiversary is coming up on Monday, on the 29th. What keeps coming to mind is just bringing forward this absolute sense that I have no idea what I'm doing, where I'm heading, and that I'm just throwing stuff up against the wall to see what sticks. That being said, I would also say that there's this new sense of a need to have on the ground independent journalism. And when we talk about independent journalism now, we sort of mean what we meant back then, which was independent, more about opinion pieces and things of that nature. I'm seeing that repeat itself. I guess it's a 20-year cycle. That's what is that, an era? 20 years is an era, I think so.
I would think so, yeah.
So I think I'm seeing some of the same things happening now, just in different formats than I did back then. I will say that my internship with then Congressman Rick Santorum continues to be an off-cited high mark of my my blogging experience, although fewer and fewer people know who that is. So that's perhaps a good thing.
I was going to say, I have not heard Rick Santorum name-checked in a while, Sue.
Well, leave it to me. I got a photo from 1991 December standing outside the Capitol building, and it's still on my resume, even all these years later.
I would not delete it. Mark, obviously a much different time when you started writing about HIV and AIDS. I am always looking for opportunities on this podcast to bring that time in our LGBTQ plus history forward. How do you describe putting your pen to paper during that time?
Well, I think I began writing very soon after my diagnosis in 1985, not days after the test became available. And I think it was a way of just processing what was going on with me. And it just so happens that because I didn't die and here I am, I've had the luxury of adding and adding and adding to the story. And it's been kind of my therapy. But I'm also, my nature is a storyteller. And so I like to tell those little glimpses of what it was like in 85 or 90 or 95 as the years gone on, because HIV is, terrible and it is fascinating. It's as if every little societal challenge we have, transphobia, homophobia, the church, condoms, body fluids, you name it. And if it makes people uncomfortable, it's all wrapped up into this tiny viral particle known as HIV. And so I still find it fascinating to write about in terms of just the big picture and also the very specific picture of a person living with HIV and just living day to day.
I have to ask about this word blogger because it's amazing how some people throw it around in very different ways. There's a conservative commentator here in Ohio who anytime he wants to dismiss any of our work says, you're just a bunch of bloggers. Well, first of all, that's not a curse word. It's not negative, sir. But it's very fascinating to me how that word gets wielded. What does the word blogger mean to you, Mark?
Oh, I'm a cinematic guy, I think in terms of movies. And I remember years ago when bloggers were emerging and they were often in the narrative, the hero, the person who burst through the scene and told, truth to power and all of that. And then at some point we became the villain. It was the horrible blogger that was publishing all sorts of misinformation. But here's the deal. Media is media. Writing is writing. Storytelling is storytelling. And I have, at various times, depending on, what company I'm in, I am a blogger, I am a journalist, I am a storyteller. All I know is I like to get in and out in about 800 words. Call me what you want, but I'm a writer. That's what I am.
How about for you, Sue? What does that word blogger instill in you?
Blogging is the way that I entered media. I'm a community organizer. I have an MSW, and I started blogging because I wanted to share information with the community in an efficient way. And I did some research on the history of the word, and you can trace it back to the mid '80s if you expand it pretty broadly, but to the concept. But the term really came about in '97, I think, and quickly. Blogging really is something where you would include a lot of people. It's a big tent. It should include people who were using LiveJournal and Tumblr and all of these different platforms that may not necessarily be popular now. But then, at least in Pittsburgh, blogging became this kind of inner circle. This group of people that were because at that point there was no social media, so we were interacting off of each other's comments. And I do agree that it took on a little bit of a negative connotation, like it's a dismissive term. However, as most blogs have shuttered, I guess I would say, or gone silent, then we're seeing more and more other kinds of media, like Mark was talking about. It's just the medium has changed, but the role of the person driving it is still there. Podcasting, obviously, Substack, email type newsletters, reels, all of those different mechanisms. For me, what it means, it's just the platform that I use. It's part of my identity now after 20 years, but I don't think it's the number one part of my identity. It's not the first thing I would refer to myself. See, it's interesting because I'm not a journalist. I wasn't trained as a journalist, but everyone thinks I'm a journalist. And they constantly argue with me when I say that. And so I've given in and said, I guess I'm a journalist, I'm a writer, but I still think of myself as a social worker first. That's the first piece for me.
I do need you to give in because I will argue with you until the end of this episode and forever beyond that, of course, you are a journalist. But I also say that as someone who I'm also not trained as a journalist. And so I have those moments of when people are like, oh, you're a journalist. And all three of us have won journalism awards. And I get that friction. And I think that some of that sometimes is with our relationship with legacy newsrooms. Sue, I can't think of another independent reporter in the LGBTQ space who has broken more stories than you. I'm thinking about all of the coverage that you have done, in particular about trans individuals who have lost their lives. There's no one who has done better to cover that than you. What has your relationship been like with more legacy newsrooms as you have been on this storytelling journey?
Well, thank you for the acknowledgement. And it's a very tragic and sad accomplishment. In general, my relationship with newsrooms has been pretty okay, but especially the last several years, just almost there's just no acknowledgement.
Mm.
Now, here in Pittsburgh, we had a 3-year strike that just ended for our main newspaper. And so legacy media was pretty held up around that. What I do find is that when writing about the violent death of trans and non binary individuals in the United States as part of the larger movement to document that horrible, atrocious pattern, most mainstream media, they don't want to talk about it.
Mm.
They don't want to acknowledge it. And more, there's this decision to turn, oh, Sue Kerr will handle that. And that's very offensive to me personally, because they're not handing me a check to do that. And it's a lot of work and it's a lot of energy. They're not linking to me. They're not giving credit and acknowledgement to the experience that is not mine. I'm not part of the trans community. So really, I find that way they're treating me is reflective of the fact that I'm writing about trans and non-binary people, and it's the reflection of the mainstream media's view of that population, who they consider to be those people. When it comes to me personally, they'll write all these wonderful things once in a while, but a good example is my blog anniversary is coming up. I think it's a pretty big deal to have a 20-year blog, especially as I've gone through all the blogs in Pittsburgh to see who's publishing. No one, and I want to say no one cares, but like no bites from the media, nothing. There's just no response, and that's okay. It doesn't really define anything, but I'm not sure what else I could do. I've won awards, I've done all this stuff, so they're just not paying attention, and I think that's to their detriment.
Yeah. Mark, I have to imagine that there are pieces of Sue's journey that are mirrored in yours. I mean, you are writing about HIV and AIDS in a way that other media are just not doing, and especially knowing that there still is a reluctance to cover HIV and AIDS in whatever we're calling mainstream media. What has your relationship been like with legacy newsrooms?
It has. I have little to do with legacy newsrooms. I have little to do with whoever those big boys and girls are that are running major mainstream media, whatever the hell that means. What I just try to do is pierce through as best I can, pierce through what's going on, what's breaking. I'm not a breaking news sort of guy, but I will get in there. I think that my advantage is I don't work for anybody. I don't work for big pharma. I don't work for any of the big organizations, the AIDS service organizations, that sort of thing. So I can call people out what I want in a way that other people are reluctant to do or just won't go there. They'll talk to me. They'll talk to me quietly, but they won't go there. Their organizations won't be able to say things that I can say. I also want to, something that Sue is saying is, yes, first of all, I want to acknowledge again Sue's work around the area of trans murders, and also say that, yes, it sucks that somehow they would silo that topic area into Sue's, make her, the person that we'll look to Sue. She'll take care of that. And although it is to all of our advantage that she is doing that, I think something that's happened to me as a writer, and it's just age and maturity and trying to expand a world outside of myself, is I spent a lot of time earlier on just kind of making my stamp. I wanted to be able to talk about my experience and what happened to me. And that was youthful and self-centered and all of that. But as the years have gone on, I have expanded that worldview and featured racism, the inherent racism in all of HIV, but within HIV organizations, in the way that gay white men were king of the mountain for so long in terms of what was going on, who was driving the response to the epidemic, or who got heard, not who was driving, because we always had allies. We always had people at our side who did not look like us, but they were ignored by us, by media, all of that. And so it's important that that we all kind of expand that worldview and look at people unlike ourselves and those that were left behind by the movement, by media. And just as Sue is able to do that with trans women and murders, I am more likely, certainly more likely than I used to be, to look at that in terms of HIV and other communities and like myself, and shining a light on them and handing them the microphone.
I think that it's really interesting when you talk about people looking externally, from external perspective at LGBTQ bloggers, that there's a sense of like, Mark S. King does HIV/AIDS. Sue Kerr's writing about this. Joe My God is writing about that. All of them, and it is like they have to fit us into these like little categories, and and ignoring the ways in which we're collaborating, and then also how we are picking up the pieces that need to be addressed. But what is going to go back to the 20-year thing, what else is really interesting is that there are several blogs, LGBTQ blogs, that are past 20 years. Joe My God, Holy Bullies, Mombian, Transgria, which was founded by a Black trans woman in Texas, Monica Roberts, who died several years ago, was founded in 2006 and still exists in some form, driven by her friends. And so that's a really interesting story to me, is this longevity of our community blogs. And again, is that it's a story that I think mainstream media could tell, because I think it would be important for other people to realize that. But I don't know that we can just depend on them to do that. We have to, I guess, do it ourselves.
I'm thinking about that silo piece, though. There's also a distinct lack of humanity in siloing, say, Sue to be covering these violence pieces. Oh, yeah, that's Sue's thing. Great. Are you thinking about the fact that you're putting this all on one person and that has an emotional toll? And so, not to mention that you're limiting the storytelling that we can all do when we are siloed into that place. But I want to talk about impact. I also, not that this needs to be your therapy session, Sue, but if it serves that role for you, I'm happy to be supportive. But I have to imagine that some of this reporting that you do very much takes a toll on you, and you as well, Mark S. King, because you are there. You're not, I think for me, if we're dealing with a particularly heavy story, I am sitting in a newsroom with three other folks that I can at least bounce some other energy off of in that way, and shove some of it off on others. And I have to imagine it can be a little bit more difficult with the emotional toll piece as a solo storyteller in the way that you both do it. I don't know if that resonates with both of you.
For me, first, it's always important to acknowledge that I'm a white cisgender woman, lesbian, queer woman. And so I'm doing this work because a friend of mine in Cleveland asked me to start doing it in 2013. And so really the work should be spearheaded by the amazing trans advocates who are out there that are leading the actual response to this. And I do want to mention that I'm part of a group. I work with a group. It is led by trans folks, and I just take my lead from them in terms of the kind of work that I'm doing. So it's not just my perspective. But an example I can give you is in February 2024, there was a terrible beating in a school bathroom in Oklahoma of a young non-binary person whose name is Nex Benedict. And Nex ended up dying the next day. And the autopsy results say that it was a result of death by suicide. There's a lot of questions. But it drew a tremendous national outrage and just a scrutiny on what was happening in Oklahoma. But you know what it didn't do? It didn't give me credit for breaking the story. Right. That credit went to the LA Blade. And the person who broke it there has now been imprisoned for sexual abuse of children.
Wow.
Himself. Even like Wikipedia and all of these things. So I find it sad that they don't give me credit for what I did, because it was hard work, but also that they are giving credit to this terrible human being who's done horrible things. And Nex Benedict was a victim of SA. So it's just offensive on a lot of levels. But because they got the tip from me, well, they read my blog. Now, I didn't have the whole story. Of course, when you break a story, you don't necessarily have every single detail. But that's just, I think, the most stunning example. And as the story continued to unfold, it spiraled in different directions. And I kept trying to bring it back to Nex's story and other stories and other details. There are a lot of things that people just glossed over. And, that was very frustrating for me, because I just felt like, it was just the 5 minutes of fame, and then everybody moved on to something else. And we haven't really seen any kind of change as a result of that.
Sue, I gotta say that first of all, I commend you for breaking that story, and I'm very aware that you did that because I read it as I was leaving for Oklahoma City for a completely different purpose
Wow.
to do a speaking engagement there, just as that city was reeling from all of this. And had it not been for your reporting to give background and context to what was happening, I would not have had the understanding as I did. But then I walked into this grieving community, was there for the candlelight memorial. I mean, it completely changed, my visit for those days. I wrote a piece called Oklahoma is Not Okay, where I profiled the people that I met during that time and how they were processing all of that. And I don't know what to say about that. I think I'm thanking you for breaking the story and then giving myself credit for writing about something that when I got there. But talk about collaboration. You fed me. You fed me and helped me understand a story that I was kind of just walking into by sheer coincidence.
100%. Mark, are there one of those stories that you put out there that you're thinking, gosh, that definitely moved the needle?
Yes, there have been stories about the impact of big pharma on the way that HIV activism, or at least policy and advocacy, is changed as a result of it in very sometimes very damaging ways. There's a story I broke about a bunch of legacy HIV activists in our community who signed on to a amicus brief for a lawsuit that was benefiting big pharma, and because of their own ties to big pharma, in my mind, their names ended up in support of big pharma in a lawsuit that actually hurts people living with HIV. I don't know of anyone other than the likes of people like Sue and myself who would have written that story, who didn't have ties to big pharma, who didn't shy away from calling names out in the way that I did. So that might be an example of that.
And I would say, in response to Mark's reporting around that, our local Pride and some of our LGBT organizations were still accepting funding. And, I started asking questions about that, saying, where are we with this? Because, of course, we need funding for the work that's being done, but at what price? And I guess it just shows the blogosphere, the queer blogosphere that we circulate. And I'm not writing about that directly. I don't have to. That's the other good thing. I don't have to recreate the wheel. I can share Mark's piece and other LGBTQ bloggers and amplify them, and then maybe frame it with a little bit of my own, local context. But that is a very wonderful way that we can interact with each other.
Sue was also mentioning the fact that she works with trans organizations and trans people who help her and feed her. The same is true with newer blogs, newer sites, which are written and led by people of color. And I'm thinking of The Reckoning,
Yep.
Which is a kind of a blog website done by Counter Narrative Project. And it is Black, gloriously Black and queer, doing stories that you just would not see anywhere else. And I really lift them up. They're due for a GLAAD award as far as I'm concerned. Sue, they should be joining us on that mantle somewhere because I think their work is excellent.
This mutual appreciation thing is one of the reasons that we started this show. This is feeding my soul like you have no idea. And hopefully feeding everybody who's listening, because you all are listening to This News is So Gay. I'm your host, Ken Schneck from the Buckeye Flame. Joining me this week, Sue Kerr from Pittsburgh Lesbian Correspondents, and Mark S. King from My Fabulous Disease. By the by, if you all are not subscribed, what the heck are you waiting for? Subscribe to This News is So Gay right this very second on your favorite podcasting app so that new episodes automatically make their way to you. Well, it is time, folks, for Glitter Bomb. Just because we've gone in a different direction this week does not mean we will ever lose our sense of queer joy on this podcast. So let's set off a glitter bomb where our roundtable shares stories of queer joy that maybe they have covered or just seeing out there in the world. Sue, give us a story of queer joy that either you wrote or someone else saw that you want to amplify to our listeners.
Well, I'm going to be self-serving here and say that last week I reached 100,000 followers on Instagram. which
Yes.
is a pretty impressive number of followers for a 55-year-old white cisgender lady from Pittsburgh. It's not what you
Amazing.
expect. And, but I use my social media to amplify. I create, of course, but I'm sharing a lot of videos and reels and things like that. And so I've made a lot of new connections with people. I've interacted with those creators. But I just think it's really interesting that I have more followers than most people in Pittsburgh. And I feel joy in that. And sometimes I feel like embarrassed, like, oh, don't show off, don't talk about that. But, it's the result of a lot of hard work. And it leads to me being able to continue to lift up other stories. Am I going to tell more stories, or are we going to go back and forth?
You could give me another one. I feel like you got another one.
I have a lot of them. I wrote my answers out. But, what I want to just say is that I see a lot of queer joy, what I would say is defiance and representation in the Starbucks strike. And
Mm.
more so than probably any other strike that we've seen in our country. And that's because they're led by younger, more informed people who are, they just automatically are being inclusive in ways that a lot of traditional unions are not. And I think that they're changing the face of labor. Well, they're opening us our eyes up to this face of labor that already existed. And what they're doing on social media is absolutely amazing. And they're doing such a great job. And I really applaud them. And I hope that everybody is honoring the strike and not crossing that picket line at Starbucks, because they're going to change things for the better for everybody.
Oh, I love that. And it is a queer strike. We love seeing that across the country. Mark S. King, give us some queer joy.
A glitter bomb makes me think of ACT UP back in the day and how they might throw out a glitter bomb or two themselves.
Heck yeah.
And the fact that we are still kicking ass all of these years later, and that AIDS activism is alive and well, maybe not well, but is very much alive. I am turning 65 tomorrow, so my glitter bomb is going to be all over my birthday cake.
Yes.
For long-term survivors to be living and thriving and polishing off the toolkit that we might have put away in our closet and decided to get it back out again for some political advocacy, I think is a very exciting development. There are some folks in the HIV arena, some iconic names who are getting together as we speak to have a response to coming up in June 2026 will be the 45th anniversary of the first reports of what would become AIDS in a medical journal. And we are going to take that anniversary, which also occurs in the month of June, where the most primary elections will be held, to use it as a way to ignite political advocacy again among those who are living with HIV and our allies, because we know that affordability and healthcare have everything to do with people living with HIV and anyone else suffering from chronic conditions. And we are going to ignite that community again. And people will be hearing a lot about it starting in January. And we have 5 months to get to those primaries and 5 more months to get to the midterms. And we're ready. We're going to build something that will make a real difference.
And we have to. Like, it's a real sense of urgency that we actually have to.
Well, think about it. In January, we're going to see the Affordable Care Act subsidies gone. And so
Right.
how many people living with HIV or vulnerable to HIV lose their health care? And then what happens? And the same is true with losing access to SNAP and other housing programs and all kinds of supports. One affects the other. And then we start to see increases in health crises because people can't get the care that they deserve, even the most fundamental care, like an annual physical. So we can't afford to not be paying attention to all of this. So, and I hope everyone who's listening will follow Mark's blog and follow all of us on social media to see what's happening, because the price that we pay is far too high. And we've been down this path before. Why are we doing it again?
This is not new. This is not new to us. Well, we certainly want to hear what you both are working on. What's coming up next for you, Sue?
Well, I'm working on a new trans and queer media project around the trans community, especially Black trans women and other trans women of color. We're working with GLAAD, PFLAG, the Transdo Task Force, and several trans day of remembrance organizations. It's kind of more of a behind the scenes technique kind of project where we're accessing resources for data and all of that. Because under the current administration, a lot of LGBTQ identity in national databases and in nonprofit databases has disappeared. So our work is a lot harder, and we're going to try to do that. The other thing I'm doing is I'm preparing my blog for archiving. I hope to spend the next year doing that. That doesn't mean I'm going to stop blogging, but there's a lot, boy, the code there, 20 years of
Oh
coding is
gosh,
like,
yeah.
and so I'm hoping to get some foundation support and then also maybe to serve as a template for other blogs to be archive ready, I guess I should put it, and move into making sure that next generations have all this information at their hands.
So critically important. Mark, what's coming up for you?
I am knee deep right now and probably going to be up to my eyeballs soon with the first stages of this movement that I'm talking to you about for June 2026. I think kind of a draft title for it is Primary Health. And it will be about, putting healthcare and affordability first as we enter the primary season into the midterms. And so that's something that I'm working about. But I'm also a storyteller. So I just posted a piece on my site about my first gay Christmas when I had just come out and I was 16 years old,
Oh,
and how I hurt my mother because I accepted a gold watch from my boyfriend as fake as his love. And then 2 days later at Christmas, got a silver watch from my parents. And my mother expected one of them to be returned and gave me that choice. And I handed her back the watch my parents gave me.
Mark
oh,
S.
And
King.
I will never forget the look on her face. And that's what I write about, the fact that this choice between a sense of emerging gay pride and family and selfishness and not knowing what to do. Anyway, that was the story that I just posted that it's kind of a look at that. Sometimes we choose community over family in a way that doesn't always feel right, but feels necessary at the time.
Where is that gold watch now?
Good gracious, it didn't last long. I think it turned my arm a certain color.
Well, I can't have you both on the podcast without getting some advice from you both, and especially for our listeners who want to get their voice out there more, who want to do their own unique brand of storytelling. What's one of those lessons, Sue, that you would want to give an up-and-comer, no matter who they are, with their storytelling skills?
the first lesson I would say is to keep control of your work. It's
Mm,
great if you're going to start creating on other platforms, but getting a website, domain hosted, all that, whatever it looks like for you, is really important. If you're creating content through the Instagram tools, you don't control that content, and you don't own it even any longer. If you create it yourself and then upload it or share it, that's a lesson I learned very early on. And I've owned my domain and I've self hosted the whole time. The other thing I would say, just hand in hand with that, is that um, get in there with people who are doing it and learn, absorb, be a sponge, take what they have to share, comments, whatever it is that works for you. There's so many people out there that are doing great work that can guide you, help you maybe avoid some missteps, and then maybe they'll be willing to share your work. One thing I don't like is when people expect me to share their stuff and they haven't given anything to my site. It's not that I want them to give me money or anything like that, but it would be nice if they read my blog or
right.
before they asked me to write about something that they're doing. So that would be my advice. Own your content, get in there and get connected with people doing it already, and give as much as you get.
Not just transactional, folks. Mark S. King, give us some advice.
Your story matters. Whoever you are out there, if you think you have something to say, trust me, you do. We're all sharing a human experience, and we like to have that sense of shared humanity. Tell that story, whatever it is, and don't be afraid to tell it. Sue is absolutely right about all the people who will be happy to assist you. But here's the thing. You got to write it. You got to write it. I've got so many people that approach me that saying, hi, can you help me get this thing published or get this story told? Oh, I haven't written it yet. You got to write it. You have to do the work. And if you don't feel like you're a great writer, take a class, find out, or talk to people, or just start. Writing is rewriting, but you can't publish something you haven't written.
we see a lot of writing now too, like because it's shaped by texting, by social media characters. Like the idea of good writing has broadened. There's still a room for what we learned in school
Hmm.
in the 80s and 90s and 70s and all that, but sometimes, I mean, you can write however you want because there's always room to edit and polish. I mean, but you just get the thoughts out.
That is sadly all the time that we have for this week's episode. What an incredible conversation. I have to thank my two panelists here, Sue Kerr, whose incredible work can be found at pghlesbian.com. Sue, you are a true trailblazer. Huge, huge congratulations on the 20 years and the 100,000 followers.
Thank you. Well, it's 102,000 now, but who's counting?
We're going to get it to 103 by the end of the week, by my estimation. And Mark S. King, whose writing can be found at marksking.com. Mark, I cannot tell you how many times your writing has made me pause and think.
Thank you very much.
And happy birthday to you.
Yes, happy birthday, Mark. That's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you.
So much celebrating.
I'm sending you a watch.
Oh, thanks. Thank you.
Yeah, it's platinum, and it's on behalf of both of us.
It's
Just
glitter.
Know that.
Glitter. We're gonna do a glitter watch.
Well, everyone, I am Ken Schneck, editor of the Buckeye Flame, and if you liked this episode of This News is So Gay, please share it with a friend. Subscribe so that you do not miss out on our next episode. Send an email on over to editor@thebuckeyeflame.com. That's me, to let us know your thoughts and rate and review us on your favorite podcasting app. This News is So Gay is a product of the Buckeye Flame, a nonprofit newsroom. Become a recurring donor today for as little as $12.50 a month, which truly enables programming like this. In the meantime, read LGBTQ plus news, share the stories of LGBTQ plus reporters, and support the work of LGBTQ plus newsrooms and bloggers. Until next week, friends.